teachers and see what you come up with. And there is mandatory reporting. And I don't know, I've never heard of anybody being prosecuted for this. But if you know of abuse or suspect abuse and you don't report it, you could be prosecuted or certainly fined, lose your license, and those types of things. And so that's what I'm going to ask you to do here is put a link, and part of this abuse, put a little explanation. And the hardest one for you will be neglect. These others are easy. And why I say it, you can't ring a bell, because once you suggest that that's a problem, can you imagine anything more insulting to a family than to suggest their child is dirty or unfed? But you're going to err on the side of taking good care of kids, and especially by the time they're in middle school, they're used to lying, they're used to covering up for it, they're not going to agree with it. But that's what you get there, abuse. Okay, sexual harassment is the next one. Range from unwelcome comments, and that's the most common, and that's what I want you to put in here. Some of this is just knucklehead stuff. Let me read this all to you, and you and I lived through this. Harassment is not rare in schools. It's common occurrence for many students. Nearly half of middle school and high school students in a national survey indicated they have been sexually harassed at school, with the majority reporting it as a negative effect of them, of course. But goes on, the harassment of both boys and girls occurs electronically via text and email or social networking too, hallways, classroom cafeterias. The harassment ranges from unwelcome comments to touching and, in some cases, physical intimidation or rape. Girls are more likely than boys to be sexually abused. LGBT students are disproportionately. The most common harassment experienced by students is verbal abuse, which includes unwanted comments, jokes, and gestures. And where's the most common place for it? Middle school is the most common place. Significant differences in the victim's sexual harassment to appear based on race, ethnicity, white background. Doesn't matter. Even the privileged white kids get harassed sexually. Low-income students report being touched in unwelcome ways more than other, more affluent ones. Again, it goes back to who's living in the home. Harassers are more likely to be male students or a group of male students. And again, if you went to middle school, any size school at all, or even maybe wherever you went to school, that's generally what it looked like. If you were to have a poster picture of what sexual harassment looks like, it would be middle school students, a group of boys harassing a boy or a girl or some LGBT student sexually. And it could be just the nature of jokes. They're trying to be funny, those kinds of things. But that's what it looks like, and it's unfortunate. And again, you get to decide what is a real harassment and what is knucklehead stuff. And it comes down here, talks a little bit about cyber harassments here. Perhaps not realizing how much their actions hurt their victims. Most harassers don't think it's a big deal, or they were trying to be funny is how it came to be. And so what you do is you teach about it. Here's what the response to what they did because of harassment. Girls are more likely than boys to report being negatively impacted by this. Okay. About half of the harassed students in this study said they ignored the harasser. That's what the student just ignored them. Girls are more likely than boys to tell the harasser to stop or try to defend themselves. Boys are more likely to turn it into a joke, to ignore it. We're going to teach her in school to prevent sexual harassment. Student suggests that school designate a person to whom they can talk to and provide online resources. Okay. So recommendation of students is that they allow an anonymous report of an incident, a victim, or bystander. And again, just be very careful because you can't unring this. And what I would say to you, here's what I did continually working in a middle school, and you'll do this all, is you talk about how you have to report it. If you're doing any of this behavior, I have to report it as the teacher. So tell your students, be careful what you say, be careful your jokes. In that middle school area is so hard because their bodies are changing, they're not sure what to do with it. The hormones are going crazy. And you as a teacher get to stand in the gap there and try and help them through that time. Bullying. Middle schools report the largest percentage of bullying incidents. Bullying may be a student who pushes them out of the cafeteria line, and we see that as bullying again. It's knucklehead stuff. My kids would consider that bullying. For one thing, we've done these long orations on bullying in our schools that most kids are terrified now, but this is one that we'd consider. If I was marking a survey and a big kid or any kid pushed me on the lunch line, I'd say I've been bullied. Even though our culture is full of bullies now, I think the governments are bullies. I mean, it's just gotten to be a way of life. Kids and how they feel safe. And the most common place they feel bullied is in middle school age. And here, this down here is really interesting. Bullies are at an increased risk of substance abuse, poor academic performance, violence in their life. And so generally the bully has some real strong characteristics also, a true bully. But bullying and be a bully are different things. That anybody can be a bully from time to time or bully somebody. Harsh words can be seen as bullying. My son got in trouble one day in one of these long, intense discussions about bullying. He asked the question, can teachers bully students? Which he was promptly escorted to the office to see the principal for misbehaving in class. Apparently, and it was a group of teachers put on, saw no humor, certainly didn't think that was a viable question. Don't you think teachers could bully students? This is what I'm saying. Their school is built on a culture of bullying, and yet we've done these long things about anti-bullying stuff. So he did not understand it, and of course, it made him think less of his school and of his teachers the way that was handled. Victims are increased risk of experiencing anxiety, depression. Thing also occurs electronically. Bullying does. Cyberbullying. There's a question on the test about cyberbullying. And again, so you're doing this. And our last one is suicide, and that's never a fun one to talk about. Oh, this last families when school authorities do not intervene to stop harassment of their children. Schools are being sued for that, I say. So you want to be on top of that. The thing that I would say to you on the bullying thing is you just don't ever want to ignore it. Even if you don't bust heads, even if you don't send somebody to the office, that everything you see that makes one kid uncomfortable, is one dominating another, is you simply mention how hurtful that can be. Because for often, people don't realize that just shoving somebody on the lunch line is a form of bullying, and it can really make kids feel awful. And so that would be your role there, is kind of that teacher in teaching about these things. And you'll run into kids in your teaching career that are real bullies that really are out to intimidate and harass others. And I felt my oldest son especially went to school with a kid that continually harassed him. And I'll tell you, the most common thing he would do is when they made basketball teams, he goes to a big school, went to a big school, and there was an A, B, and C, and a D team, 4 different teams, and you can imagine what the difference was. Well, he made the A team, and this big kid said to him, I can't believe they even let you play. I wouldn't even put you on the D team, let alone the A team. And of course, he tried to laugh it off, came home, cried his eyes out that somebody had said that to him, that he shouldn't even be on the D team, let alone the A team. Needless to say, he has grown up and he's bigger than that kid now and better than that kid, but at the time that kid was bigger and thought he was the best. But it was a form of bullying that went unnoticed. I urged him to tell. I wanted to go up and tell. He didn't want me to. It would make it worse. This kid will beat me up. Those kinds of things. And that's very common in middle school. And you will be the catalyst as a teacher to stand in that gap. This is interesting about suicide, and again, you want to bring this in. It's the third leading cause of adolescent death behind automobile accidents and homicide is suicide. Third leading cause. Automobile accidents, homicide, which is murder, and suicide's the third one. So you want to bring that in. This thing, 14% of high schoolers report seriously considering suicide. Previous year, 11 had a plan, 6% attempted. Here, this is interesting and highlight. Hispanic youth are more likely than their peers to commit suicide. Interesting. Male adolescents are more likely to commit suicide, but females are more likely to think about it and make non-lethal attempts. Gay teens are particularly at risk. Suicide attempts often calls for help. Teacher who does that. Suicide attempts are often precipitated by interpersonal conflicts. Being aware of the signs if you alert a health professional in that. Please also include here the warning signs. Changes in person's mood, changes in sleeping patterns, anxiety, withdrawing from friends and family. Also have these conflicts, so make sure you bring that in so you have that. So these challenges of teen years, these sexuality and pregnancy, substance abuse, economic realities, let's take a look at those. And again, please read this chapter. It's a very good read of all the things going on. Defining our sexuality as beings begins with early teens, continues through the years. Girls and women often connect sex with being accepted, being attractive, being loved. Boys then contrast that sex as status, power, domination, violence, far cry from loving relationships. Thus, ideal sexuality for men and women may differ, and that's not new. That's been around forever. Teenage sex is not prevalent as some believe. Percentage of young children who have ever had sexual intercourse has increased during the past 25 years, more than 50% to 46. Has decreased, I should say, from 50 down to 46, with males being slightly more sexually active than females. Approximately 1 in 3 high schoolers are sexually active, that is, had sex in the last 33 months. The majority of them using contraceptives. One of the results of early sexual activity is teenage pregnancy, and of course that goes with a whole bunch of other things. Although the number of teenage pregnancies and births has been declining, the rate in the United States remains one of the highest among industrialized nations. And of course, this next part here, poverty appears to be the most important factor in determining teenage mothers. In other words, what's so interesting about that is how that's perpetuated from generation to generation, because so many of these low-income mothers were teenage mothers, and then it's perpetuated. And I can tell you, when I was teaching in the middle school, how ritualistic that was, that the mothers of the kids were very, very young. And you do a little math and you could quickly figure out a lot of these mothers were teenagers when they had the kids that I was working with. But it's a key risk factor of pregnancy, but it's damaging impact that we buffered through strong social networks. Most unmarried teenage mothers continue to live with their parents, but their families are disproportionately low income. So I say most teenage parents come from low-income families. Reducing family poverty has also reduced teenage pregnancy. Many teenage parents, especially mothers, are forced to take adult responsibilities much earlier than societies expect. And I'll tell you what my take on that is. It isn't the baby time. It's those toddler times, and like the little ones really need guidance, instruction, and teaching is what's absent when the parents are too young. Teenage mothers are sometimes forced to fend for themselves in an impoverished condition. Their own parents can't provide or no support. The fathers of their children are often absent, either not contributing or unable to contribute financially. Poverty also contributes to the births of babies with low birth weights, babies who are more likely than other children to experience health problems, developmental delays, abuse, neglect. All of those things go with that early pregnancy. Girls and women more connect sex with being accepted. Poverty is the risk for teen pregnancy, and teens are becoming more responsible about sexual activity. And of course, they're much more likely to drop out, not continue. Overall, teenagers are becoming more responsible about their sexual activity, are using a contraceptive to reduce the risk of pregnancy, transmission of disease, and sexually transmitted disease. School programs such as sex ed and health clinics are helpful, but they are not always supported by families and communities. I wonder what that means. However, the programs that have proven most effective are the ones that convince teenagers they should either practice abstinence or use contraceptives consistently. As many young people struggle with the development of their sexuality, they may seek guidance from teachers like you. There's a question on the test, that's why I highlighted that, about that's not supported. And all that means is some families want to do that themselves, want to deal with themselves, and have a different message than what the schools and communities have. And there's all kinds of stuff about that. But there's a question on the test, and I want you to get that right. And then substance. And there's been much written about this, and you had to be asleep not to heard some of it. Public attitudes for public schools. Respondents rank drugs as the 5th greatest problem public schools face behind funding, discipline, overcrowding, and fighting. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I've never seen students say funding was a problem. That's just so interesting here that we think funding is a problem, because people can't even name what the funding would do, but they see that as they list it here as the top here. Very interesting, but discipline, but drugs. And I think it's subsided some from what it was, but my kids say that it's so prevalent that even in the middle school, parents worry about drug use interfering with their child's ability to function effectively. Drug use may lead to cutting school, hanging out with a wrong crowd, being arrested, and chemical dependency that require professional treatment. A large percentage of teenagers try one or more drugs, but alcohol is still their favorite. And there's a question on the test, what's the biggest one? It's alcohol, still the most available, being used more as twice as often as other drugs. And they're just going back to this survey, 2011 Phi Delta Kappa Gallup Pulse survey. Half of our high school seniors at some time tried an illicit drug, usually marijuana. And that's a little alarming that half have tried drugs and it's marijuana, even though most don't consider themselves regular users. Younger students are experimenting with drugs, but the rate of illicit drugs of 8th graders has been declining since 96. 1 in 16 8th graders are already smoking cigarettes. Seems a little high to me. Tried illicit drug, and I want you to put that here as marijuana. I can't even remember what number we're on here. Number 8. Number 8 is marijuana here. Okay. 1 in 16 cigs. Put that with number 8. Bad news is higher rates of non-medical use of prescription painkillers, Vicodin, oxycodone, and stuff like that. Okay, so here I'm going to clip this also and have you bring it into the notes right here. So we'll clip that and bring it right here. This will be number 9. It's a clip, 8.7. Okay. And what are the economic realities for these kids? Well, I'm in the highlight. I'm reading this highlight. 68% of high school graduates go to college immediately after high school. Okay, 68%. All right. Although African Americans are 66, Hispanics are 60, students enroll immediately after high school at lower rates than whites. So 70% of whites. Difference also exists in enrollment in college by families. Socioeconomic status. 52% of low-income students go to college immediately. 67% of middle-income, 82% of high-income students. Females make up 57% students enrolled in college, which is, of course, more than half. Down here, the percentage of high schoolers working today is 20%, points less than 2 decades ago. 16% high schoolers age 16 and older worked while attending school, with more females than males. And I think that's on the test also. 16% work. Okay, and here's what I know about that is I'd like to see my kids work, but in this day, if you're going to be in sports, there isn't any time. You do sports every night. They both do 3 sports, so it's year-round, it seems like. It goes on to say here there's a little more employment in the summer, but that's somewhat unusual. Talks about the lack of opportunities for some folks. After school jobs are particularly beneficial to students of low-income families, do not have family school connections. Unfortunately, many students could derive long-term benefits from working while in high school, especially those in inner cities, have limited access to jobs. The lack of employment opportunities contributes to low esteem, pessimism, stuff like that. Okay. So that's the economic realities. And then we get into more victimhood, this prejudice and discrimination. A democratic society is built on the principles of society equally and respect the individuals within it. However, many persons of color, limited English speakers, women, persons with disabilities, and people low incomes, and people affiliated with religions other than Christianity. I find that so interesting. They single out the Christians. You, if you're a Christian, are not discriminated against, and I beg to differ, and I think you'll get the chance to attest to that when you're going to be held under extreme duress to say whether you're a Christian or not, you believe in Jesus or not, and you'll get your chance. If it's not here now, it will be in the future. But it lists all these folks that are discriminated against, even religious people except Christians. And that's what I'm not sure why I would even go there, but that fits the narrative of these authors through the whole textbook, so they did. So, I experience equally with other members of society. Power relationships among the groups influence young people's perception of themselves. And so they're big on this, power relationships. And members of the group, schools are One example of institutions in which power relationships exist. Students' work and class rules are determined by teachers. Listen to this now. This is really interesting. Teachers are evaluated and disciplined when necessary by principals, who report to superintendents of schools. Stay with me now. This is the hierarchy they're getting to. The rules and procedures for managing schools traditionally have been established by authorities who are not directly involved with school and who may not live in the community served by the school. Here, the highlighted part. Parents, especially economically disadvantaged areas, often feel powerless in the education of their children. And power allows access. And I'm telling you, folks, I often feel powerless. I see see things that you just feel powerless over to change or even acknowledge. And at times when I have brought up things, I felt like I was beat down by the school that my kids go to. And you'll see that too as your parents, or if you're parents now, you'll see things, injustices that you think should be corrected. And but I know when I worked in this middle school, these low-income families really felt powerless and overwhelmed and even intimidated by school. And I thought one of the reasons they didn't have power is because they knew their children weren't doing well, and they knew things weren't well at home. And so it really sapped their self-esteem and their their desire to make an impact in here. So they would get very passive with schools, and at times really let us have a pass when they shouldn't have on what their kids needed. But power allows access to societal benefits such as good housing, tax deductions, best schools, social services. I don't know tax deductions, where that comes from, but and that's what, if you don't have power, you miss out on those. A more equitable sharing resources school would guarantee that students, regardless of family income or background, would have qualified teachers, sufficient books, other instructional resources, well-maintained buildings, playgrounds, access to high-level academic knowledge. Unfortunately, such quality does not exist in all of our schools. And I know there's been many, many case laws suing schools over this, that education's facilities and stuff should be equal. And I know in the Sioux Falls district here about 20 years ago, they spent millions trying to make their buildings equal and have equal opportunity. And I think they've done a phenomenal job of trying to do that. But I do know there's some inequities yet in our schools. And so it does kind of hamper that situation. And it would be nice if it was a more fair distribution. So let me jump back here. Power relationships, if they feel powerless. Power allows access to these societal, such as housing, tax deductions, this. And again, like I say, I'm not sure how that fits in, but it does. Apparently it does. So let's go to prejudice. These things here: otherness, prejudice, and socialization. And so what is this otherness? The process appears to be integrally tied to the identity, which involves assigning characteristics and behaviors to members of other groups. Construction of others places on dominating or submissive role effective others. Some young people identify themselves in relations with young women. They exert their masculinity. So let's look at that. I know this is on the test, so make sure all of these are. So otherness, prejudice are there, and you've got to have a strong feel what it is. Some some exert their masculinity over their female counterparts in academic, sports, sometimes relationship. They're not the ones who should weed powder or others, while white males in some economics build their identity of opposition of colors of males. And again, I disagree with that, but that fits the narrative that's been through this whole book, that victimization here. I think our teachers, especially you, will do a phenomenal job of lifting up all kids, and you'll be colorblind to all these things. You'll teach kids, treat kids, and teach kids as they should be. Lots of questions on the test about prejudice. It's a preconceived negative attitude toward members of specific ethnic, racial, or socioeconomic groups. Sometimes extends to people with disabilities or with different sexual orientation or gender. Such negatives are based on numerous factors, including information about members of a specific group that is stereotypical and many times not true. Prejudice is individuals may have had little or no direct social contact with the members of that group. Individual prejudice may have limited negative impact on members of the other group. However, these attitudes are often passed on to their children through socialization, and I really reject that. But the contention here that fits their narrative is you and I as parents are passing this on, and I wholeheartedly disagree. But I say it fits their narrative, and there's a question on the test about we racist and bigoted parents pass on our racism and bigotism to our kids, and the term is called socialization. Through this process, many students from low-income families and ethnic minorities are prevented from gaining the skills and knowledge necessary. Here, this is really saying you take a number of steps to keep your prejudice from hurting others. And again, I said I wholeheartedly reject that contention that we as teachers are racist and prejudiced, and it tells you how to contend with that. Okay. Right, that's all we're going to do with that. Discrimination. Many of your students and their family members have experienced discrimination, and there's a question on the test about that too. Exclude from equal access to housing, jobs, and educational opportunities. Discrimination is different from prejudice in that it is more than an attitude against a member of that group, and so you have to know that. What's the difference between discrimination and prejudice? Discrimination is different. It's a process that prevents members of a specific group from participating in our society. Most students of color, females, low-income, disabilities experience discrimination in aspects of their life. African Americans receive more severe sentences from the judicial system, lead to women not being paid as much as the men, etc. That's discrimination when you act on it. If we do not experience discrimination everyone experiences, we may not have a difficult time acknowledging that it exists. And again, I take offense at that. Many white students do not see themselves as advantaged or privileged in society. They do not think they receive any more benefits from society than anyone else. These students may have a difficult time fighting social injustices because they have neither experienced nor become aware of this. As a result, rights based on group membership versus debated on college campuses, board meetings, etc. Laws that promote the support members of group maintain a superiority of power of its members. I don't know why they want to go there, but that's huge in this book. And so here, I disagree with this. The authors feel that English only is a racist thing, to speak English only. And you do what you want with that. And then racism, and you know what that is? That is based on, prevents members from participating. Racism involves a racial superiority. Potential concerns about children will be treated. Families may distrust educators and accuse them of being a racist. And I have lived through that, and that's why I guess I reject some of the contention here is, I can remember one time 2 kids got in a fight, and one was a Native American kid, and when I separated them, all it is got between them, and this kid jumped up and took a swing at me and said, "You racist," and screamed and hollered and went crazy that I was a racist for separating this fight. And he was fighting a white kid, and I didn't say a word, I just held him apart, and that was my first experience with that. And then he was raised by a grandparent. Grandparent came in and said, "Yes, the reason you're against my son is you're a racist." And he was pounding on a kid smaller than him. So that was my experience with that. And so like it says here, they may accuse teachers of being a racist. They don't know us, they don't know anything about us, but I was a racist. They're just standing up for their children, doing what they can to ensure that their children treated equitably and have the same opportunities in this. However, the behavior of these parents is usually incongruent with schools' view of positive, supportive parents. Teachers and school officials should avoid reinforcing parents' perception of the school as racist and not caring about success. And how do you do that? It doesn't give you that. It says it's you. Monitor your own interactions with students. And again, I think in the year 2013, this is overblown, overdone, because I have faith and confidence in you emerging teachers, that you will be colorblind and you will lift up all kids and you won't ask about that. You won't matter to you. You'll roll up your sleeves every day and do the best you can and leave all this laying on the floor where it belongs. But you can see we devoted a whole chapter to this, of contending that teachers may be racist. And so I don't worry about that you as all. Here's the other isms that you're going to understand is sexism and ableism, and you know what those are about. Let's go over here. Exists ableism, discrimination against persons with disabilities, sexism, devalue women. Can it not be men? Can it not be men? Could be sexist. Can we not discriminate against men for position? Well, let me give you a quick story on that, and then you can tell me to go jump in a lake or whatever. But I more than once applied for jobs as administrator in a building where they had to hire a woman because they wanted a gender balance in their administrators, and only to figure out later that they really couldn't hire a man. It had to be a woman because they had too many men on their staff. And so I felt that was a sexist thing to do, but you would never get anywhere trying to prove that. But that was a big thing, trying to prove to the world that we have a gender balance, and therefore more than once like this. We're going to have 3 principals in this building, only 2 of one gender at the most. We already have 2 men as principals. This one, regardless, is going to be a woman. And therefore, you don't need to apply for it if you're a man, because it's not going to be a man. Now, you can't say it out loud. It's just the way it was, and it was unspoken. And so, but that's what those are. And then engagement in school is this last part. We're getting to the last part. Who leaves school early? This is interesting here, and there's a thing on the test about 10% of schools have been labeled dropout factories in which less than 60% of their students graduate on time. Isn't that interesting? 10% of schools are labeled dropout factories. Maybe I missed something here. The problem is particularly critical in large urban segregated schools where African American, Native American, and Hispanic students have only about 50% chance of completing high school, placing them at great risk of not earning substantial wages in employment of adults. And that's really the big thing, is once they don't finish school, their chances of successfully participating in society goes crazy. School districts with low graduation rates are often more often in central cities with disproportionately high numbers of low-income and immigrant families. Of the 15,500 high schools, at least with at least 10 seniors, 10% have been labeled dropout factories. And so, for the most part, you don't want your child going to a school that's a dropout factory where 60% don't graduate on time. Graduation rates vary across ethnic groups. Figure this here is the one, and again I'm going to ask you to bring this in your notes, and so we're going to put this right here. What number is this? 10. Number 10. Number 10, and bring in 8.8 from the clips. Okay. And so by different races and stuff, of course, white are higher, but here's this group again that causes us problems. These Asian Americans have a disproportionate number. They're much higher than even the white percentage. African American, I'm a little surprised that African Americans have a lower graduation on time rate than the Native Americans, because in South Dakota that's not true. Then here this also will come, here's our discussion, is retention better than social promotion for students? And again, I don't want you to have an opinion on this until you've read both sides, and so I'm going to go and put that on our discussion now, right here. Okay, that is your second one, and that goes right here. Also, that'll be our number 11. Discuss. Okay. Only 50% of students with disabilities complete high school, and that's a very low number. And of course, with disabilities, such a range of kids, from very severely disabled to kids with very mild disabilities. Only 22% of persons with disabilities who are 16 or older are in the workforce, and that's the alarming part to you and me. Again, is they don't get to contribute in their society when they drop out. One might expect students who complete high school are more likely than dropouts to be employed. By age 25, 62% of high school graduates without a college degree are in the labor force, as 46%. So even without college, 62% compared to 46% if they drop out. So, when you see 46, it's less than half. 62 is not a high number, but 46 is really a bad number. By age 25, more education does not make a difference. 77% of college graduates are working. More education does make a difference. 77% of college graduates are working, earning double the income of high school graduates who not attend college. And here's the key: is the ninth grade, and that this says here, ninth grade is a critical period for dropping out because that's when they decide. And so, if you're teaching middle school, early high school, a lot of this you'll have a chance to impact this. It talks about here the national initiatives dramatically decrease the dropout rate by 2020, and I want you to bring those in here, and that's going to be your number 12. And I'm just going to say national initiatives on the bottom of page 216, and you'll see that like Colin Powell's fingerprints on here and what those rates are. What they're hoping to achieve here. Increasing the number of students reading at a proficiency by 4th grade, reducing chronic absenteeism, providing sustained and quality adult peer support for students who need it. Plan calls for states to raise compulsory attendance to age 18, which over 30 states have. And of course, we have already compulsory attendance to 18. And I think Sioux Falls School District has done some great things to work with kids that normally would have dropped out. Then resiliency here as personal attributes give some students strengths and fortitude to overcome obstacles, and self-efficacy is can handle the change. And here there's a little more on self-efficacy. I want you and have good social skills, and so that I want you to bring that in here also. This will be number 13 as you finish this, because there's a question on the test about what is self-efficacy. Okay. And this to be true. Higher family SES, remember what that stands for? Contributes to positive resiliency. I'm going to put that here as number 14. Is what is SES? SES. Okay. Positive, but not require other positive factors are family members who are involved in their children, providing caring environments, help children with homework, attend to grades and stuff like that. They also help by quality educational rec opportunities in their school and neighborhoods, regardless of the challenges they face. They're usually social, optimistic, energetic, cooperative, inquisitive, attentive, helpful, punctual on task. And then it does a nice job here talking about how technology can help with that, and how they do. And again, it's MetLife is all over it. It's interesting here when they talk about how important this is, when earlier we were talking about how not all had access to it. And so make a case to give more access. Teachers in low poverty schools are more likely to have students use technology to prepare written text. And this is interesting. It's interesting how we've switched to this terminology, low poverty schools. The whole conversation about high poverty, but suddenly we switched the terminology here. Are more likely to have students use technology to prepare written text and develop multimedia presentations, while teachers in high poverty schools are more likely to use it to students learn to practice basic skills. Almost twice as likely to use technology to communicate with parents. Can I make a plea for that? One of the things we can say, and it's made a great case in here, is how not all have that technology. But I'm telling you, one of the things we like to do then is punish the rest of the kids from this in the name of fairness. If we say it's not fair, we don't command, we don't require, we don't instruct kids to use the technology that's available to them, because it's not fair that everybody has it. And I would pray and hope that we get past that 90% of the kids do have access, so let's go ahead and use technology in our learning, even at home, rather than continually to impede their learning because it's not fair to the other 10%. And one of the things I think we're doing to our kids today, our middle kids, is continually holding them back in the name of fairness. So rather than lifting up the bottom, we hold the others back. and I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, seen this, and it really hit home with my own kids, is you can't, because not everybody has that. And it goes on to talk about how important this is. Down here I highlighted this. All students spend time needed, especially if a classroom has limited number of computers. Thus, the teacher may be tempted to assign homework that requires using the internet. Problem with assigning homework on the internet, however, is not that all students have computers at home. Even if the assignment does not require the use of the internet, those students who have access at home have an advantage in compelling. So that's what I'm saying. So if there's an advantage, then we don't do it. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that, because I think you're impeding the other kids. And here's the other thing I'll say. Now these low-income families all have free phones from the government, and they're often they're smartphones, and they have the access data plans. In fact, in one survey I saw said they had more access, better smartphones than kids that came from middle income families, but it's not mentioned here. It doesn't fit the narrative they're trying to make continuously here. But I'm going to say to you, deal with that on the other end. Use the technology, assume they have it, because more have it than you think or have access. If you're teaching in a low income school, that's one thing, but you get to know and work with these families, you'll come up with solutions. And rather than impede your whole class and your whole school with this attitude, I'd go ahead and find a way to use the technology and get kids going, because going forward, even the kids from low income are going to be better served if have better command of technology. And so put it in there, and I think it's a great equalizer for a lot of these kids. So don't hide behind the fact that they don't all have it, because if they don't, they can get access, and you can certainly work with them for after school things and stuff, so that they can use the school access and stuff. Because many of the schools, more and more are growing where they will have one. We won't go by classrooms. Each kid will have one. And so then you're going to be left behind. The kid's going to be behind if you don't have a better attitude about that. And parent involvement are critical to the development of good communication with parents. More proactive, engaging, regular, and consistent communication with families has long been considered vital to success students. Email, short newsletter, written notes, regular communication, and I think that's vitally important. I never feel like there's enough communication with teachers. They're overwhelmed. You get to our schools, they're seeing 150 different kids a day. Again, they go back to MetLife here. They found that parents want to be connected there for having a child is having academic, health, or social problems. And I'd really like to talk about it every day. I know that's not possible. One of the things it says down here, teachers are dependent on mail, phone, and this. I don't think so. I think phone has been outgrown, at least in my world, the people I know. Please send some digital text first before you call, because I, like you, am busy and I can't always handle a phone call, even at night. And so there's all kinds of ways. And one of the things I'd encourage you to do is use websites, things that I can go to. The hardest thing for us to handle at our house is notes, is paper things. What's way better for us is digitize things, because what's a lot more likely, number one, we can get our hands on it when you send it to us instead of running through kids. And number two, we can find it. I can store it. I can always do searches for it. If it's a piece of paper, a note that way, it gets put in a pile with a ton of other junk around here and never really comes to fruition again. So it talks about homework here also, how important it is, how you can really use these websites and stuff now, and these technology tools. And that's what my kids did. Every assignment is there. Everything they need is there. That won't ever be an excuse to connect. And often these teachers of our kids will take emails and stuff at night and weekends and stuff if we need to communicate with their learning. Families are more likely to volunteer to assist teachers in engaging families. That's what this is all about too. Know the community expectations for how parents should assist them, improving theirs. Parents are more engaged. And one of the things it talks about here is how low-income families have a hard time getting away from their jobs. So what I would do is create weekends and evening involvement for those in your school. Have things you want to get the kids excited. Have some in-school things after school that are orchestrated you by the teachers, not by an administrator, not by some outside thing, but a teacher that's going to have some kind of an after-school gathering or talk or something, and let these folks come and get to know you in that way. The 6 types of parent involvement, I'm also going to clip. It's going to be your last thing here. I'm going to say it's import this clip into your notes from page 220. What number was this on again? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. 15. So number 15 is you're going to import this about parent involvement on page 220. All right, and talks about different ways to do that. There you have it, chapter 8, working with the families.